Well, welcome to the AMAC studio on Capitol Hill. Today I'm here with Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie from Kentucky's 4th District. You make a distinction between being a partisan and being an ideologue. What is that distinction, and how does that inform how you govern as a congressman?
When I came to Congress, I thought partisan and ideologue were synonyms. And I found out after about a year they're opposites. Here's what I found out about partisans. Partisans will always follow their party leadership. In fact, they oftentimes won't even look at what's in the bill, much less, read the bill, because their party tells them how to vote.
Right.
Now, ideologues, usually people say, oh, he's an ideologue. Well, actually, I think ideologues are better than partisans because ideologues still know what they believe in, and they will follow their ideology in spite of their party if their party is wrong. And so occasionally I've found occasions to go a different tack than my party. And a lot of times that's because my party's not being conservative. So that's why I'm an ideologue and not a partisan. I've also found that Democrats who follow Nancy Pelosi, they're partisans, and there's no hope. There's no chance I can get them to vote for my bill or co-sponsor my bill. But the ideologues over on the Democratic side of the aisle, just like a broken clock, occasionally they're right twice a day. A broken clock's right twice a day.
Catch them at one of those two times.
Catch them at one of those two times. And they don't follow in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi. So if it's something we can agree on, then I can work with an ideologue on the other side of the aisle. So I don't find it to be an insult anymore when somebody says you're an ideologue. I said, yes, I still vote the way I believe, and I read all the bills. And just because my party tells me to do something, I don't do it.
And you have had some success working across the aisle, a lot more so than other conservative members of Congress.
Well, I try to smile a lot when I'm on the floor of the House. Also, where I sit in Congress, I think has something to do with it. I sit on the aisle. And so, and as a matter of fact, a lot of ideological conservatives do sit on the aisle in Congress. There's no assigned seating. And you'll find Democrats right there next to the aisle. And so literally, we can work across the aisle. It's ironic. I'm not in the Freedom Caucus, but they're my best friends, and they sit right there on the aisle with me.
Yeah. Okay. So smiling and geography as well.
Yes. Yes. Smiling always helps.
AMAC has over 2 million seniors across the country. We have 5,000, I believe, in your district. Our members love the country, and right now they're really concerned about what's happening in the House with impeachment. Can you just kind of bring us up to speed, give us an insider's perspective on what's happening right now in the House?
Sure. I'm on the Oversight Committee with Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows and Paul Gosar, some really solid conservatives. Mm-hmm. And what Nancy Pelosi did is she took impeachment out of judiciary and put it in the Intel Committee and the Oversight Committee and stuffed it down in the SCIF, 3 floors under the Visitor Center. So I've been down in the SCIF there, working with Jordan and Meadows, deposing those witnesses. We call them the witness tryouts. Adam Schiff is like, okay, good enough. No, get that one off. Yeah. So he's only calling the witnesses that he thinks will build his case, and he's not going to allow us to call witnesses not in the SCIF. And now that it's become public, they moved it out of the Intel and Oversight committees and just put it in the Intel Committee. So I have to track that, from the audience instead of the dais now. Mm-hmm. But they still won't give it to judiciary. Unfortunately, this is just a partisan witch hunt. There are people who wanted to impeach the president since day one. And, first they tried it when Comey was the leaker. He leaked to the New York Times through a professor so they could get an investigation started. But they don't like how that investigation went because they gave it to an independent, prosecutor, Mueller. And so this time they did basically the same play call, but now they're holding the ball, and they're being judge and jury and calling their own witnesses and being the lawyers for the witnesses at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And denying your witnesses.
Denying our witnesses. They object when we ask their witnesses certain questions, and then they sustain their own objections. It really is crazy. But at the end of the day, I think the truth is on our side, and we're going to prevail. The first day here didn't go well for them in Congress, and I don't think subsequent days are going to get any better for the Democrats. I'm hoping it will go quickly because nothing's happening in the House with this big distraction. It will go to the Judiciary Committee, where it's supposed to start anyway, mm-hmm. and then there'll be a vote there, and then it will probably come to the full House, where there will be a vote. It's almost a certainty that this will be on party lines and the vote to impeach will succeed in the House, where then it will go to the Senate. There's two ways it could end up in the Senate. It could either be dismissed by a single vote by Senator McConnell and the rest, or it might be wise, frankly, over there to have a little trial and call our own witnesses.
Well, let's move on and talk about legislation. You have a bill that AMAC supports, H.R. 3971. That's the Senior Citizens Tax Elimination Act. We have a lot of seniors that are on fixed incomes. They can't afford expenses that just pop up out of nowhere. How would your bill help them and help seniors across the country?
I'm glad you asked that. I didn't know until I got elected to Congress that Social Security benefits were taxed. And so when I started researching this, I found out it started in 1983. Like they went all the way to 1983 without taxing them. And then they passed a law in 83 that said we're going to tax half your benefits. And they set the threshold. At the time, it was pretty high for retirement. And they thought, well, I think it's $25,000 and $32,000 if you're married. If you make more than that, then you'll have to pay tax on your Social Security. But
that sounds like how a lot of taxes start.
Yeah, so that's an introductory low price, right? Yeah. So they started this out, and if you think back to 1983, you could buy a lot if you had an income of $25,000 single or $32,000 married. But fast forward today, they've not ever adjusted those limits. And so according to the Congressional Research Service, about half of Social Security recipients meet those limits, and they have to pay tax on their Social Security. But there's something that happened between 1983 and today. In 1993, they said we need to tax them more. So instead of just taxing 50% of your Social Security benefits, they tax 85% of your Social Security benefits.
Mm-hmm. And your bill would change that, obviously. You have 26 co-sponsors on that bill, and it's bipartisan.
Yes, I'm very excited. And this is really, in large part, thanks to AMAC. I think last Congress, I got maybe 10 or 12 co-sponsors. This Congress, we're not even a full year through the 2-year cycle. And with the help of AMAC and the members of AMAC who are calling up their congressman and saying, hey, why don't you co-sponsor this bill? We got up to 26 co-sponsors now. And I'm super excited that we got a Democrat. And so,
absolutely.
That's the message I want to give to AMAC members who are watching this. A lot of people who have like Democrat congressmen say, I'm not even going to call them. It's not even worth my time. They would never co-sponsor this Republican bill. Well, we've crossed the threshold and we have a Democrat. And so you could share that with your member, even if your member is a Democrat. Give them a call. Let them know they should co-sponsor H.R. 3971, which would, and here's what the bill does. All my bills are really simple because I found out they don't read them up here. Even if you make them short, sometimes they won't read them.
Even if it's one page.
That's right. So this one's just a few pages. And so but the essence of it is your Social Security income is not reportable on your tax return.
Simple enough.
It's that simple.
Next, I'd like to ask you about, kind of politics aside, your rugged individualism. There's a documentary I came across on Amazon, Off the Grid, Living Off the Grid with Thomas Massie. What drove you to kind of live the off-the-grid lifestyle and create your own off-the-grid house there in Kentucky?
Well, in a way, our homestead is inspired by Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. I got to visit there, and I noticed he tried to do as many things on his own farm as he could. And he collected rainwater, which might get you in jail these days.
Be careful these days.
Right. Yeah. So he collected his own rainwater. They grew a lot of their own food there at Monticello. And, I am a crunchy con. That's a term for like granola conservative.
Okay.
I believe in leaving the earth in a better shape than we found it for our next generation. Just like I want to reduce our debt, I would like to make the planet better. Now, I have a different way of doing it than the liberals want to do it. They want to force it on everybody. I say, practice what you preach before you go out and try and force everybody to do it.
Yeah. So you don't endorse the Green New Deal then, I assume?
I read it because it's only 14 pages. And when I got done reading it, I realized why it's only 14 pages. There are only 64 crayons in a box. It's really that simplistic, and it could never work. It's a lot harder than what you think to go to solar. And right now it's too expensive. It would be a great hardship on, fixed income people, folks, if you said, you know what, we're going to force everybody to have green energy right now. But because I'm an electrical engineer by training, I was able to do a lot of it myself. My wife's an engineer. She's also a very patient person. Mm-hmm. She's willing to go without air conditioning when it's really cloudy and we don't get much sunshine. I don't think most people would settle for that. Yeah. But in any case, yeah, our house is 100% solar. We use timber off our farm to build it. We raise our own cattle, so we have our own beef and our own chickens.
That's pretty impressive, even for an engineer from MIT.
Yeah, well, my wife grew up on the farm, so that's where those skills come into play, the farming part. But you know, for me, it's where I go back and recharge my batteries every week after living in the swamp for 4 days. You need something to sustain your energy. And that's where I draw my energy from, and my neighbors. Just because we're off the grid doesn't mean, you know, we're hermits. You know, in our rural county that we live in, neighbors pitch in and help each other. It's a group called Free the People that produced it. So you could Google that and Off the Grid or just Off the Grid Thomas Massie documentary. It's about 30 minutes, but watch out. A lot of people they think, oh, I'll just watch a couple minutes, and they get sucked into watching it. And so if you spend 30 minutes watching the whole thing, I apologize for those 30 minutes you'll never get back. But it might be slightly entertaining because my wife and kids are in it too.
Well, lastly, Congressman, is there one message you'd like to send to our seniors across the country?
Absolutely. I've been here almost 7 years now. And the thing that I found out in Congress is nothing good ever happens in Congress until the Congress people get forced to do it. And so the most effective way that you can reach your congressman, believe it or not, is a phone call. And it used to be the case that you had to pay for long distance. It's actually cheaper to make a phone call than it is to write a letter. And in fact, your congressman will get the message immediately. And you may not believe this. I wouldn't have if I weren't a congressman, but I get fewer phone calls than I get letters. So the phone calls get more attention. So if you could, you know, whether it's my bill, HR 3971, which would eliminate the income tax on Social Security, or whether it's some other bill that you are passionate about, pick up the phone, call your congressperson. Don't call somebody else's congressperson, okay? And you've also got 2 senators. So everybody needs to make 3 phone calls. 1 to your U.S. representative, 2 to your senators. And then the other message I have is make sure you've got good information. Don't listen to the fake news. AMAC is a good source of information. I wouldn't come on this show if it wasn't. And find good sources of information, not the emails from your crazy uncle or whatever, or something you saw on Facebook. You know, AMAC is up here in Washington, D.C., paying attention, watching stuff behind the scenes, and making sure you get the true meaning of what's going on up here.
Great. Well, let me say on behalf of 2 million seniors across the country, thank you for your activism on issues that are important to seniors, and thanks for joining us here today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, if you'd like more information about the congressman, you can go to massey.congress.gov. I believe that's right.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's #SassyWithMassie.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.